Good evening, Bermuda. Today, I am joined by the Minister of Health, who has the latest update on test results and the work within the Ministry of Health, the Minister of National Security, who will provide details of the policing plan for the upcoming holiday weekend, and the Minister of Tourism and Transport, who will lay out the measures in place to begin commercial flights to Bermuda when we move to Phase 4. As a country, we have gone over a week without any new cases of COVID-19. The number of people successfully fighting off and defeating COVID-19 continues to grow, and the number of Bermudians hospitalized as a result of this disease continues to fall. We have seen more of our friends and neighbors economically displaced by this pandemic returning to work, and more of our business adapting, innovating, and reopening. We have come far, and yet we must never forget the people who have lost their lives, and we must never forget the people who remain out of work. As a government, we continue to provide a safety net for our unemployed and continue the work which is necessary to ensure that more of our fellow Bermudians can get to a place where they can continue to provide for their families. Earlier this week, the Cabinet agreed to extend the unemployment benefit program for one additional month to support our people and provide them with an added layer of security as businesses reopen and our economy begins to move again. The Minister of Labor and the Minister of Finance will join us next week to give details about the extension of the benefit and to discuss matters related to the economy and related to labor. Earlier today, at 6 a.m., Bermuda has moved into Phase 3, which is moving to normal. Some government workers who have been working from home will physically return to their offices, while some will continue to work from home, while we provide seamless service to the public for all public services. Nurseries and childcare will begin to reopen, subject to the guidelines laid out by the Ministry of Health. Our churches and houses of worship will begin to reopen. Restaurants will be able to provide indoor dining on a limited basis, and cinemas and museums will begin to accept patrons and other recreational facilities such as bowling alleys and members clubs. Gyms will reopen their doors. As stated previously, we remain in a place where masks will still be required. Physical distancing will still be needed, and your government will continue to test, to monitor closely, and continue to remain proactive in protecting our island. The world has changed, and as a country, we have successfully adapted to not merely survive, but begin to seeing a way forward where we can thrive in this new and changed world. Yesterday, I participated in talks with CARICOM heads of government to discuss the reopening of our respective countries' borders to visitors. On an ongoing basis, we have been studying the successful restart strategies of Hong Kong, Australia, St. Lucia, Bahamas, New Zealand, Cyprus, and Austria. We are moving safely and steadily towards getting our country open again and making sure that we can have more economic activity. Today marks not just the beginning of Phase 3, to our shore, which we are tentatively expect, if all continues to go well, that we will move to Phase 4. This is a plan that focuses on protecting our workers and our community, emphasizes testing and screening of potential visitors, and is committed to making sure that Bermudians and visitors alike are kept safe from harm. The successful implementation of this plan means that hotels can start taking booking, our hotel workers can prepare to return to work, and our restaurants and taxi drivers will hopefully have more business and client and tourists to be a part and participate in those particular businesses. Bermuda's entrepreneurs, workers, and people will begin to see jobs return, and we will begin to work, and there will be more opportunities that we can provide. As managers and business owners start bringing their employees back to work, it is very important that they do not do so at the expense of Bermudian workers. We must continue to give Bermudians the opportunity to earn a wage for their families. And it is not acceptable for the reports that I have heard that guest workers are returning to work when there are Bermudian workers in the same organization, both of whom have been laid off, where guest workers are returning to work and non-guest workers are, or sorry, Bermudians are not being called back in to work. This is unacceptable, and this behavior is contrary to the spirit of the policy of immigration and will not be accepted. The former minister responsible for immigration, the Minister of National Security, has previously stated that this practice cannot be allowed. And as I had stated earlier, the Minister of Labor will be here next week to specifically lay out the measures that will be taken to address the ongoing incidences of this behavior. What I will state, however, is if you are an employee in a case, in an instance where your employer has left Bermudians redundant or on layoff while returning persons who are work permit holders or guest workers to work inside the same establishment inside of these particular jobs, please contact the immigration hotline. And that number is 296 5202. Again, that number is 296 5202. Anyone who has been in the city of Hamilton for the last few days would have seen certain restaurants that have been granted permission to construct outdoor premises for outdoor dining. I have received a number of pieces of commentary surrounding this. The first instance is that the government is going to do whatever we can to ensure that as many persons are able to return back to work. And if that means being flexible, then we are going to be as flexible as possible. It is important to recognize that we have been very flexible in our reopening strategy. And in our flexibility of a reopening strategy, we are balancing the need for protecting the health of our country while also balancing that against the need to reopen our economy. There are, however, some persons who have asked why restaurants are allowed to construct outdoor facilities, whereas clubs are not allowed to construct outdoor bar facilities. There is an actual difference in the way in which these facilities are governed. Clubs and liquor license establishments are regulated under the Liquor Licensing Act. And the Liquor Licensing Act has specific restrictions that apply to certain places. What the Attorney General has assured me is that the Attorney General is looking at revisions which can be made in order to allow for clubs that may have indoor bar services under the Liquor License Act to be able to possibly provide those services outdoor. Any of those matters will be part of Phase 3B, which Colonel Birch mentioned on Monday, and which further details will be provided for next week. I recognize the disparity that certain people feel that this is providing to certain businesses, but it is understandably that we have to continue to make sure that we are abiding and enforcing the law. I have, however, asked the Attorney General to look into this, who has responsibility for liquor licensing, and she has assured me that we will look to find and provide a solution that we'll be able to provide an update for. What is important, however, is that this government will work with any business who wants to find a way to put people back to work, as long as we are balancing the health of our economy, our health of our country, with the economic needs of our country as well. With that, I will now invite the Minister of Health to give her update. Minister?
Thank you, Premier. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, there were 71 test results received by the Ministry of Health, and none were positive for COVID-19, making this the 11th day in a row without any new cases. Thank you to all who have contributed to this excellent position. Bermuda continues to have 141 total confirmed positive cases, and their status is as follows. There are 5 active cases, of which 4 persons are under active public health monitoring, and only 1 person is hospitalized. None are in critical care. A total of 127 have now recovered, and the total deceased remains at 9. The average age of all of our confirmed positive cases is 61, and the age range of all of our positive cases is from 18 to 101 years. The average age of all deceased cases is 74, and the age range is 57 to 91 years. Overall, 57% of the cases are Black, 41% are white, and 2% are other or unknown. The source of all local cases is as follows: 41 are imported, 84 are local transmission with known contact, 11 are local transmission with an unknown contact, and 5 are under investigation. Today, I'm really excited to announce a progressive new initiative with regards to COVID testing in Bermuda. The Ministry of Health has teamed up with the marketplace to offer convenient pop-up testing right outside of a marketplace store near you for the entire month of June. The test is safe, quick, and convenient. We understand that not everyone is able to drive to our Southside testing location, and we want to ensure that everybody who wants to know their COVID status is able to do so. The grocery store offer a convenient location for staff, shoppers, and for the general public. Now, it is important to note for the public that they will not be in any way impacted by the testing stations and that they are not in risk of any way. The testing will take place in secure areas of the parking lots and not inside the stores. You can book online via the government website at coronavirus.gov.bm or call the COVID-19 hotline at 444-2498 between the hours of 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. And one of our very helpful telephone operators will be happy to assist you and make a reservation for you. Or just show up and drop by. They are welcome. All drop ins are welcome. A full schedule of testing days and times has been posted on the government website. I want to thank the marketplace again for supporting the government's efforts in helping us to reach our goal of increasing our testing capabilities and the frequency of tests. Other convenient pop-up locations around the island will be announced shortly. For more information about pop-up testing, again, you can call 444-2498. Also, a further reminder, if you participated in the Black Lives Matter March last week, Sunday, and were in close contact with anyone who was not wearing a mask, you are strongly encouraged to get tested. Close contact means being within 6 feet of someone who was not wearing a mask for 15 minutes or more. Remember, COVID-19 has an incubation period of several days, and you may pass on the virus before you experience any symptoms. And also, many persons with the virus are asymptomatic throughout the entirety of the infection. If you were at the march last week, Sunday, and again, situated by someone who was not wearing a mask for over a period of 15 minutes within 6 feet of proximity, you should get tested by Friday, the 12th of June, which represents 5 days after the march, or subsequently, as this will maximize the likelihood of the virus being detected if you carry it without any symptoms. Likewise, all persons who, by the nature of their work, spend a lot of time in close contact with others should also get tested. This includes workers such as hairdressers, barbers, retail workers, and so on. For personal service workers, imagine the assurance that you can give to your clients if you can show them a certificate showing that you were tested for COVID-19 and are not positive and clear. And this works both ways. Imagine the peace of mind you will get if you know your client can show that they too have a negative test result. The pop-ups around the island and around the city of Hamilton will make this very easy and convenient for people to get tested. And finally, as we head into the weekend, I would like to remind the public that COVID-19 does not take a break on Saturdays and Sundays or on holidays. We must continue to practice mask wearing and physical distancing, even during weekends, in order to stay safe. We have seen the trend for the last 2 weekends in reports to our Health IQ app of a reduction in safe distancing practicing by our population. We all need to remember that the move towards fewer cases and reopening Bermuda will only happen if we continue to do what we need to do. And that means wearing our mask properly and keeping our distance, as well as washing our hands regularly. Also, I just want to remind persons that there are no raft ups should be scheduled for this weekend, please. And just because your boats may be physically distancing, please make sure that the swimmers also maintain distancing as well. There have been too many cases reported of several boaters getting together, anchoring independently of one another, but then swimming to a friend's boat or to the shore only to congregate. This defeats the whole purpose of having no raft up rules. Please try and avoid commingling with other household members as much as possible. You can all enjoy the water and the company of friends by remaining 6 feet apart. Also, we are encouraging people again to log on to the healthiq.bm to tell us how you're feeling and what you're seeing in the community in terms of protective measures being taken. Your information will, of course, be confidential, and it will help us greatly as we transition throughout the phases. Thank you, Bermuda, and stay safe.
Thank you, Minister of Health. Now we will hear from the Minister of National Security on matters within his remit. Minister?
Thank you, Premier. Good evening, Bermuda. As we approach another holiday weekend, the Bermuda Police Service and the Royal Bermuda Regiment will maintain their regular presence around Bermuda, including on our roads and our waters, our beaches, and our parks. Over the 3-day weekend, the regiment's presence will increase with a focus on the highly visited public spaces in the east, west, and central parishes. The police and the regiment will also have a heightened presence on Bermuda's roads, covering various checkpoints during the 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew hours. I should note that we are noticing a trend on extremely low arrest rates, with only 2 arrests this week for nighttime curfew breaches. This is indicative of excellent community engagement and support of the government's COVID management plan. Now that we are in phase 3, I just want to reiterate some key guidelines for our community. Phase 3 sees the resumption of religious and faith services at institutions of worship. The church buildings are now open, that we are in phase 3, but within that we must do what we have. I must do what I have to ensure that we have the appropriate physical distancing and make sure that it is observed. Places of worship usually see a higher percentage of our seniors in attendance. However, these are individuals who we consider to be at risk. Their safety and their protection is paramount. We encourage outdoor religious services, as these are considered the safest option. At present, communion, baptisms, church luncheons, and agape feasts are not yet approved by the Ministry of Health, and this, we believe, will commence in phase 4. For more information, the public can visit the website for full guidance as it relates to the opening up and the different phases. We recognize that the days are getting considerably warmer and residents are spending more time engaging in recreational water activities. Here are some key reminders regarding boats and maritime activities whilst we're in phase 3. Boating activity is now allowed until 10 p.m., which is 1 hour before curfew begins at 11 p.m. Therefore, all boats have to be off the water at 10 p.m. The Coast Guard will be enforcing the 10 p.m. water curfew. Additionally, tour boat capacities have been increased and raised from 10 people to 20 people, including the staff. But physical distancing guidelines have to be followed for all boating activity. Gatherings at public beaches and parks are permitted during phase 3. However, all patrons must be off the beaches and parks by 7 p.m. This is enforceable at 8 p.m. Regarding our restaurants, as you are aware, indoor dining has recommenced. The Ministry of Health guidelines must be adhered to. Patrons at these establishments are encouraged to comply with the restaurants in providing your name and contact information for tracing purposes. With curfews being raised to 11 p.m., restaurants will close at 10 p.m. The public is also advised to be mindful of drinking and driving, which the BPS will be actively enforcing this holiday weekend and going forward. Laundromats. You will be pleased to know that the 1-person limit has now been lifted. You are also allowed to go to the laundromat any day of the week while still observing physical distancing and the use of face coverings. Last Sunday, the Black Lives Matter March was supported by the Bermuda Police Service and saw approximately 7,000 people in attendance. It is arguably one of the highest assembling of people seen in living memory. The Bermuda Police Service took a community-based approach with the organizers to facilitate a lawful and peaceful gathering. As a result of that engagement, there were no instances of disorder and there were no arrests made. Today, at my weekly briefing with the police commissioner, we discussed a number of things, elements that can be done to make the Bermuda Police Service stronger. I believe it is important and an opportune time for me as the Minister of National Security to recommence the task of setting up the police authority. This will be an independent body that will look at the police budget and how to implement it. It would also be tasked with dealing with police complaints. The police commissioner has also engaged with CURB to extend the restorative practice training in the BPS, as well as to provide input to officers and staff on Bermuda's history and issues such as unconscious bias. The public is aware that a serving Bermuda Police Service officer was suspended for the publication of a racist post on social media. The commissioner will utilize the fast-track process within the police conduct regulations to expedite this matter, and he is fully aware of the community's sensitivities around this matter. We recognize that there are more planned marches, and the Ministry of National Security supports and believes that in our citizens' right to democratic, peaceful protesting. I must stress that individuals who wish to demonstrate, and this includes public processions, must get the appropriate approvals from the Deputy Governor, and the event must be sanctioned by the Minister of National Security. On the matter of Ms. Chevelle Dillon Burgess, the investigation into this disappearance is ongoing. Specialist advice has been provided to the BPS in relation to the search strategy. In addition, the 39-year-old man remains on bail for the murder, and the investigations continue into his involvement as to Chevelle's disappearance. Please be advised that Permanent Secretary Colin Anderson has moved to the Ministry of Labor. Dr. Danette Ming is now the acting Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of National Security. Thank you, Premier.
Thank you very much, Minister. As I indicated in my earlier comments, the government is planning on, if all things go well, of looking to move to phase 4 at the expiration of the state of emergency on June 30th, which means that phase 4 may commence on July 1st. But of course, phase 4 involves one of the things that are eagerly anticipated, which is the return of regularly scheduled commercial traffic. We cannot make that decision on the day of, as there is certainly advanced lead time, which is needed for our hotels and our airports. So we've made the decision that at this point in time, it is going to be prudent for us to make that announcement, and so we can plan ahead. However, as the minister will state, that things are always subject to change, as we see here. But now the Minister of Tourism and Transport will certainly go ahead and outline the various measures that are going to be in place to protect our country as we prepare to welcome tourists. Minister of Tourism and Transport.
Thank you, Premier. Well, you took away my first 3 paragraphs, but that's okay. Good evening, everyone. And as the Premier said, and I'm happy to repeat, as the world and as our people in Bermuda have been eagerly waiting the confirmation when the LF-Wade International Airport will once again have regular scheduled commercial flights. And I can now confirm that the decision has been made to resume commercial flights in phase 4, which is expected to happen on July 1st. To that end, the Ministry of Tourism and Transport and industry stakeholders continue working to finalize all the protocols and requirements that will be put in place to secure Bermuda and her people from the spread of COVID-19. Because of the fluid and dynamic nature of the pandemic and the need to protect all of our community, we have produced a working document which will be fine-tuned in collaboration with the Ministry of Health. What I can share this evening is an outline of the process visitors will go through when traveling to and from Bermuda. This outline will allow travelers to plan and the tourism industry to prepare, even while the details are solidified over the next few days. Our plan features 5 stages of visitors traveling to Bermuda. Stage 1 is the pre-departure. Stage 2 is in flight. Stage 3 is upon arrival. Stage 4 is on-island experience. And the final stage is the return home. I will give a brief overview of what we are working on and what visitors and Bermuda may expect. In phase 1, pre-departure, prior to departing for Bermuda, travelers will be responsible for several things, including obtaining a certified PCR COVID-19 test that is negative and taken within 72 hours of departure, ensuring they have appropriate health insurance, wearing face masks when traveling to the departure airport, and wearing face masks and practicing physical distancing at the departure airport. There will also be certain forms that must be completed, including the traveler screening form that those on the repatriation flights will be familiar with, as well as an arrival card containing information shared between immigration and the Bermuda Tourism Authority. Work is underway to merge these forms, making it more convenient for travelers. Also, we want the assistance of airlines servicing Bermuda to help prevent persons with COVID-19 coming to Bermuda. This will be done by having airlines conduct verbal health questioning at check-in, as well as conducting a visual check of arrival documentation and forms. Some airlines have already carried contactless temperature checks, and that is something we would want all airlines to do. Phase 2 in flight. During the flight, all airline passengers must wear a face mask while on board the plane. Airlines will also disinfect the aircraft, and seats will be assigned, bearing in mind the need for physical distancing. Efforts should also be made to limit contact between passengers and crew. Phase 3, upon arrival. Upon arrival in Bermuda, travelers must continue to wear the face mask and practice physical distancing. Customs and immigration officials will be wearing the necessary levels of personal protective equipment, or PPE, and shielding. Upon arrival in Bermuda, every passenger must undergo COVID-19 testing at the airport. Depending on the volume of test, the results are expected to be received within 24 hours, but in most cases, the turnaround time will be less than 8 hours. At the airport, there will be safety protocols in place. These include the Department of Health conducting contactless temperature checks, hand sanitization stations located throughout the facility, all staff wearing face masks, and the sanitization of luggage. Phase 4 on-island experience. Once visitors have exited the airport and are securing their ground support, face masks must still be worn. In addition, the standard requirement for physical distancing, face masks, and hygiene apply to drivers and passengers alike. Ideally, contactless payment methods are also preferred. At the visitor's place of lodging, it is advised that contact be limited at check-in. Guests should be given access to their rooms as soon as possible, where they will be quarantined for a matter of hours until the COVID-19 test results are delivered. Throughout a guest stay, their temperature must be taken once per day and the results recorded. All local accommodations must ensure the necessary staff is available and the necessary safety measures are in place in the facility as advised by the Ministry of Health. These include having medical personnel on call, enhanced cleaning protocols and hand sanitizing stations, staff trained by the Department of Health on COVID-19 best practices. Face masks must be provided for guests and staff, amenities that comply with physical distancing guidelines. While the plan greatly mitigates the risk of someone arriving in Bermuda with COVID-19, we are finalizing a detailed plan for persons who may test positive during their visit. Bermuda's public health professionals have a well-earned reputation for managing COVID-19 cases successfully, and there is every reason to believe that that tradition can continue in phase 4. As far as the ability to partake of island experiences, we are working to finalize a policy that allows travelers who test negative 72 hours in advance and who also test negative on arrival in Bermuda to be able to have the freedom of movement adhering to the health guidelines available at the time. Testing will be required during the time here every 3 days if they wish to move around the island. At the conclusion of a guest visit, and as per the standard practice for public transportation, the requirements for onboard physical distancing, hygiene, and mask wearing will apply to taxi drivers and passengers. Again, contactless payment methods are preferred. Once at the airport, the same requirements when arriving in Bermuda apply to departure. Pre-boarding health screening in the form of temperature checks will be conducted if the destination jurisdiction requires it. Please bear in mind that as we work to finalize the protocols and requirements for travel to Bermuda, rest assured we will always place the safety of our island and its people above all else. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister De Silva, and I'm sure that there's a large number of persons that are looking forward to us reopening our borders and allowing visitors to visit our country in a safe fashion. And certainly the Bermudians who are still stranded overseas will welcome the resumption of regular flights. Just as a note, before I move towards a few other remarks, there will be a press release going out from the Minister of Public Works regarding special provisions for public parks and beaches this weekend. Public parks and beaches will close at 8 p.m. this weekend on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So it is important to note that this will be taking place, and beaches and parks will close at 8 p.m. and will reopen at 5 a.m. As we move into phase 3 with our economy being open safely, we must remember our individual responsibility to stop the spread of COVID-19. If you are sick, stay at home, follow the Ministry of Health's guidelines when entering buildings, and continue to make sure that you are wearing your mask and maintaining physical distance. As I have said many times, following these public health measures can and will save lives. I want to encourage all of us to not be complacent. We've heard the recent news of a significant reduction in the number of active cases, but it will not be wise of us to assume that COVID has been eliminated from our shores. It is not the time to let our guard down, as it only takes 1 or 2 positive cases for us to begin to flare up again. And so I see comments about saying, oh, we have so few cases. Why do we still have all these restrictions, etc.? The reason why we've been able to open up with our phased approach as quickly as we have, because the international guidelines are to wait 28 days between the moving of phases, and we've done our moving of phases instead of being in 4 weeks, in 3 weeks, is because of the good results of which we're getting. But it is only because we have done what is necessary, continue to remain masked, and to practice our physical distancing that we have been able to make this progress. Letting our guard down can set us back. And it is key that this epidemic is not over and it will be with us for some time. Many of us are beginning to let our guard down, and it is important that you understand and remain vigilant. We think that things may be harmless, but the fact is that given that there is so much asymptomatic transmission of this virus, we can never know. And you heard me share the stories last week of persons who would have brought this virus back home to elderly family members who ended up going to the hospital and being tested positive upon admission. So it is critically important that we continue to keep our guard up. Testing has been critical to keeping the number of confirmed cases low. We have 200 people a day. However, many times these slots go unfilled as people are not getting tested as much now as they were before. Just like the Minister of Health has said, I encourage everyone, if you have not already been tested, to do so. And you can go to coronavirus.gov.bm and click on the link which says at the very top, which has COVID-19 testing. I'm certainly encouraging persons who are personal services provider or food service provider or people who are on the front line. You can book your appointment and go get tested at your convenience. Minister Birch had stated about phase 3 when he was here on Monday, phase 3B. And this is just going to be an interim measure of where we might be allowing a few more additional services next week. Two of the things of which are going to be considered by the Cabinet Committee earlier, as I mentioned, limited outdoor bar services for community and members clubs, and in addition, the expansion of some personal services. Cabinet has given tentative approval to the expansion of personal services, such as facials, beard shaving, massages, and waxing. However, these expansion of these services are going to be subject to regular testing of those operators due to the increased risk that these interactions can present. So it is my thing tonight to say that I would advise operators who are inside of that category to go to coronavirus.gov.bm and book your tests so that you can go ahead and get tested to ensure that you are clear of the particular virus. So that next week, when the services are allowed to be expanded, you are able to go ahead and expand your services. If you are not tested, you will not be able to expand the services, as we want to make sure that we are keeping the country safe. And this, of course, in some measures, are high-risk activities. So again, for those persons who are operators, go ahead and book your tests. For those persons who are desperately waiting to shave their beard or to get their wax or to get their massage, reach out to your operator and tell them to make sure they go get tested so that when these things open up next week, you will be able to take advantage. On the issue of cannabis reform, the public is invited to share their thoughts and ideas surrounding this topic. The Attorney General has pivoted the scope of the government's cannabis policy to achieve a regulated cannabis regime. She issued a statement to all media last night encouraging comments on the policy document and the illustrative draft during this consultation period. Those who have an interest in this topic are posting on social media and providing commentary through the local media. Some persons have even taken upon bad advice to emailing their members of parliament. This is a consultative process, and the only way that your views will be heard and reflected is to have your comments recorded. And that is that you must go to the government website, forum.gov.bm, where you will find the consultation documents and instructions on how to submit your views, questions, and concerns. On that website, of course, you can vote up and down various remarks and say whether or not you support comments which have been left or not. The Attorney General advises me that she will continue to update the consultation document in real time on a regular basis so that people can see that the comments which are being come from the public are being taken into account. But it is essential. Please do not have those conversations on social media. Please do not have those conversations amongst yourselves. Make sure that you go and submit your thoughts and concerns on forum.gov.bm. National Heroes Day is on Monday, June 15th, when we will recognize Bermuda's 8 national heroes and remember them as we celebrate their accomplishments. I will pause to reflect on the local and international accomplishments and contributions made by one of Bermuda's national heroes, Dr. Paulu Karama Kafega. Many years before there was a Black Lives Matter movement, he was leading movements for equality and justice. He was a civil rights leader and political activist and played a key role in the fight to abolish the property vote as the founder of the Committee for Universal Adult Suffrage. And he was also an elected member of Parliament. He was an ecological engineer and an internationally recognized freedom fighter. He traveled around the world to countries including Liberia, Ghana, Kenya, Australia, China, Vanuatu, Fiji, Papua New Guinea, where he taught, shared his knowledge as an engineer working on local and country-wide projects. He met with country leaders to reshape the narrative for people who were displaced in their own countries and joined the fight against oppressive authorities. Dr. Camara Cafego was a consultant to the United Nations and was the first recipient of the Human Rights Commission's Human Rights Award. As we prepare for the weekend, we must remember the importance of Heroes Day and the sacrifices made by Dr. Camara Cafego and the work he contributed to advance Bermuda's society and many countries around the world. Finally, before I take questions from the media, I invite you to join me this Saturday evening at 7:30 p.m. when I will answer your questions live on the Government of Bermuda's Facebook page. That broadcast will also be shown on CITV, and I'm happy to entertain questions on any matter of government policy or also questions on Phase 3, Phase 3B, and Phase 4. Our next CAFS conference will take place next week, Tuesday, June 16th, as Monday is a holiday, and then I will see you again next week, Thursday. With that, I'm happy to take any questions that members of the media may have.
Good evening, all. Jonathan Bell from the Gazette, the Royal Gazette. Minister of Health, the bulk of my questions are for you this evening, so I'm going to give this a try. First question that I had, at this point, are you able to tell us if all the rest homes have been retested? Right. Have the homes which had COVID cases, have they reopened? As in, have they been able to restart their activities and have new residents come in if possible?
The rest homes that had COVID cases continued to operate. They didn't stop. They just isolated the patients as is required under public health guidelines.
Yeah, perhaps I can refine it. Say if are they able to take new residents?
Oh, absolutely,
Oh.
if they have space.
Fantastic. Next one, when is the senior, including rest home residents, considered to be recovered? Is it after one negative retest or two?
I believe Dr. Peatball answered that question a couple of weeks ago when she was here, and they are retested. So if a person tests positive, then they are retested again at the conclusion of that 14 days.
That's two, right. And are you able to tell us how long a wait is there between testing and retesting at care homes?
They're testing it between the 14-day period. So if they test somebody today, for example, then they're retesting them prior to the conclusion of that 14 days.
Thank you. Last one for you, Minister. Regarding the antibody tests, the ministry says the results from Helix is going to get released to patients' doctors. Do you know about when that'll be? We've heard from patients who are still waiting.
I can't answer that. I'm not actually sure. I'll have to get back to you about that.
No problem. Thank you. Lastly, I think this would be one for you, Mr. Premier. In terms of immigration, has the government's policy on work permit renewals changed as a result of the pandemic and all of these job losses? And if so, can you spell out the new policy for us?
I certainly will not be able to spell out any new policy, as the policy on work permits is a published policy document, which has been on the website, so that has not changed. The minister of who has responsibility for immigration, the Minister of Labor, will be here next week and be happy to speak about anything on that direction. But the policy has not changed. There are a number of persons who have expressed concerns that the former minister responsible for immigration, who is here, who can certainly speak to this issue, upon the reopening of the Department of Immigration, denied certain work permits. But I think that this matter has been overstated. That insofar as there were reports and rumors last week, and people were coming that the government had denied every single work permit that had come up for renewal, and that's just not the case. And I think that persons have to recognize that this government has a very good record of balancing the needs of business versus the needs and the requirements of Bermudians to have a place to work and to advance in their own country. I can give examples of the excellent work of Minister Keynes when he was the minister responsible for immigration in which there were instances where there were persons who wanted to apply for PRCs. And we told the companies, no, you must demonstrate that you are actually serious about not only hiring Bermudians and having them for window dressing, but also promoting Bermudians to positions in the company. And lo and behold, after us holding the line, we saw Bermudians be promoted up the chain inside of certain businesses. So we have a record and we're going to continue with that record. But I think it's very important to note that in some of the cases which were reported where persons, where work permits were not renewed, these were cases in some, and they were asking for permission to reside and seek. We're certainly not going to be approving permissions for people to reside in Bermuda and to seek employment at a point in time when there is certainly going to be excess persons who are looking for work. That is permission that is not often given, and that is something that in a lot of cases was certainly not granted, because if persons have been let go, the policy of the government of Bermuda is to not extend reside and seek permits, and for those persons to settle their affairs and be able to leave the country when that allows. And I don't know, Minister, if you want to add anything to that.
Further, I simply like to add further to that, Jonathan. And in certain circumstances, the applications came in early February. As you know, we shut down in middle March, and the circumstances in our country drastically changed in the end of May than they were in February. So in many cases, we were told the persons that they would have to re-advertise because we indeed felt that there were a number of Bermudians that could fill the aforementioned posts.
Is 6 questions, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's quick.
Good evening, everyone. Maya Palacio here from Media Maya. My questions come mostly from the community tonight. So my first one is in regards to Cup Match being canceled. Some persons want to know if they're still allowed to camp during the holiday vacation.
You want to handle it?
Good evening, Maya. Firstly, Cup Match is not canceled. We will enjoy our 2-day holiday, as is our normal tradition. The game was canceled by the Somerset Cricket Club and the St. George's Cricket Club, but everything around it that we normally celebrate during that time is actually still a go.
Great. So are there any regulations to campers?
We
go
will,
ahead.
we will at the appropriate time, as we're looking at everything as we go along. We're taking advice from the Ministry of Health, and that is actually that is something that working. We have a subcommittee that is going to be looking on it, and at the appropriate time, we will let the public know of what the conditions around the holiday will be.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
If I may just say something at a very basic level, if there is a curfew in place, it is unlikely that people will be allowed to camp. But we don't know what may happen towards the end of July. But right now, for instance, there's people who want to camp. There's a curfew in place, and they are not allowed to do so.
Okay. Thank you very much. My next question is about sporting clubs and gym guidelines. Some people want more in-depth answers as to do they have to wear masks when they're in the gym and working out, and also about clubs, footballs, basketballs, if they can start up again.
Thank you for that question. As a gym enthusiast, I was thrilled to be able to go to the gym this morning, actually, to CrossFit, and we did not have to wear a mask. Clearly, when you're participating in strenuous activities such as CrossFit or any other thing where you're getting an increased heart rate, then there's no requirement to wear a mask. When you enter the facility, obviously, and when you depart the facility, there is the requirement to continue with social distancing and wearing a mask, but certainly not while you're engaging in strenuous activities. And then with respect to sports, there is the limit. Sports have not been prohibited, but there is the limit of congregations insofar as groups of more than 20 people.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And my next question will go to you again, Minister Wilson. A camp counselor had a question. They got the regulations saying that they are only allowed 10 kids per 20 feet by 25 feet area space, and they kind of want to know why is that when the max allowed is 20 persons in groups.
This is a camp, a government
counselor.
camp.
Yes.
I don't have the regulations in front of me. There are spatial, with respect to the Department of Health, they did provide some guidelines insofar as how many square feet should be available per child, so that we can ensure that as best as possible physical distancing does take place, because we do recognize that we are, as the Premier indicated, we are still in the middle of a pandemic, and notwithstanding our eagerness to try to get the economy running again, because clearly we need to, that's very important, but there are still regulations and guidelines with respect to physical distancing and the like that we are encouraging persons to adhere to for the purposes of keeping everyone safe.
Thank you. And my last question for you as well. Persons want to know, when will government allow caregivers the opportunity to work at 2 locations again?
That is something that has actually been discussed as recently as Monday at the Cabinet Subcommittee on Reopening that's chaired by Colonel Minister Birch. And at this point, we are still discussing that, but there doesn't seem to be an appetite clearly at this point, simply because we are still, again, in a pandemic, and we are dealing with persons that are working with very vulnerable populations. And what we don't want to do is see a situation where a person works at one rest home facility, for example, and becomes exposed and asymptomatic, and then becomes a super spreader by working at multiple rest homes. So at this point, though it is actively being discussed, at this point, there is no appetite to change that, because we are dealing with a very, very vulnerable population. But again, the conversation did take place as recently as Monday, and the conversations are ongoing, and certainly as will form further discussions as we move to different phases.
Mhm. Thank you. And if I may, just one other question. Students, actually university students, current ones, are wondering about traveling back for school, if it might be open as early as August. And some people even have houses which they need to get their belongings out of before their lease ends away as well. So any word of advice or something for students, because I know the airport might be opening July 1st, but a lot of them have been sort of panic messaging about being able to get back to school in time.
Well, if everything goes according to plan, they won't have any worries whatsoever.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My first question is for Minister Keynes. Minister Keynes, this weekend is usually the Queen's birthday parade. Will there be a parade today? And when will the Queen's birthday be officially marked?
Good evening, Trevor. There will not be a parade this year because of the pandemic. The governor will be having a gathering at Government House this Saturday, and it'll be limited numbers for obvious reasons.
My second question for you as well, sir. Officers and inmates at the Westgate Correctional Facility are extremely concerned with the process or possibility of the coronavirus ending up at Westgate. What do you say to comfort those that are in the facility?
I'm not and I say this respectfully, we're not going to comfort or placate anyone. We've done this systematically. On the 21st of March, the 23rd of March, the plan was shared with the leadership team. It was shared with the officers at large. The plan was then shared with the inmates. This week, as you know, there was a concern with a specific inmate that there were some concerns around him. As soon as the incident was raised, he was put in segregation. He was then taken to the hospital. He was brought back home. He was tested. He was kept in segregation the entire time. When we work in certain facilities, we have concerns around our safety. We're working in a prison, but we had a plan. He was tested. He came back negative. If he was found positive, there was no need for panic. There was no need for histrionics. There was a COVID pandemic plan, and we'd have simply activated that. We did not have to activate it because the inmate was not positive. So I don't believe that it is any cause for anyone to be concerned. We have a regime. We must stick with the regime. We must make sure that we isolate prisoners, new prisoners that come into the facility for the requisite 14 days. There is no need for us to panic. We have a systematic plan in place. Let's follow the plan. If there's a need to escalate, then let's go to the pandemic plan and work the steps of the pandemic plan.
Thank you, sir.
Please, I think it's also important, Trevor, that you note and realize, and this is not, we have as the minister said, a systematic system of testing. So we did test all inmates. But I think it's important for you and for everyone else, just because someone coughs doesn't mean that they have the coronavirus. I mean, the symptoms for the coronavirus are encountered in a number of particular instances. You understand what I'm saying? Lots of different respiratory things. So I think that it's not necessarily helpful for alarms to be raised when we certainly have a situation where we're doing systematic testing in nursing homes, systematic testing in our prison facilities, systematic testing of essential workers, systematic testing of those particular persons, et cetera. So I think that the alarm is there, but I think we should recognize, number one, we have gone through this testing regime and we're going to continue to go through this test regime. And number two, just because someone has a cough does not mean that they have the coronavirus.
My next question is my third question for Minister Zane de Silva. There is a popular billfish tournament which takes place in early July. Is this tournament coming to our shores, which is a big tournament for Bermuda?
I'm happy to say that it is, Trevor, and we look forward to all the guests that, I mean, my phone's been ringing off the hook, as you can imagine. So I'm looking forward to all the guests that are coming, and many of them, as you know, are repeat guests, and many of them will stay for several weeks at a time.
Premier, you've today confirmed what TNM reported a number of weeks ago, but you denied. My statement is this, that the island will be in phase 4, I stated, by the end of June. You've just stated that by July the 1st, we're going into phase 4. What is it that informed you the decision that you've moved to phase 4 by the state?
Well, I don't have the same recollection as you would have, that I denied it and said all the rest. What I said is that there is no predetermined time on any phases, and I think that we've been very consistent there. But what the government has done, it has looked at where we are insofar as the epidemic, where we are insofar as testing, where we are insofar as the management of this particular disease, and we've moved to phase 3. We have said that in order to move to phase 4, what is particularly important is that we set out an approximate timeline, because we cannot say on July 1st, we're moving into phase 4, planes come here today. We have to have time to prepare in advance and to make sure that we do that preparation. So that's why we've laid that particular thing out. But as the minister has said, and as I have said, that is our plan and desire at this time. If next week or the week after, if after activities, whether it be the march or this weekend or different things, we end up with a large outbreak, then we're certainly going to have to push those plans back. But that is our intention at this time. We have always said that there is no predetermined time for phases, and we've held fast to the fact that there's no predetermined time for phases. But because of the specific requirement on phase 4 about making sure that we have advanced notification to our airline partners and others, the cabinet felt it necessary to go ahead and set a target date. And so that is the reason why that date has been set, whereas in previous times, we had said that there is no predetermined time for phases, as there was not.
Thank you. Minister Kim Wilson, I've received an alarming call today from an individual that has been waiting for surgery for months. He's losing his sight, and he was due to get surgery a time ago. His question is, when would he be able to get, or when will the hospital, I know you can't answer for the hospital, but when will operations or surgeries be permitted for some of these individuals to get these surgeries that they've been waiting for?
Thank you, Trevor. I think it's important to note that the hospital did indicate that obviously because of the pandemic, there was a restriction on the types of surgeries. They were only conducting surgeries that were essential and emergency surgeries. They have recently announced that commencing on the 1st of June, in fact, they're looking at relaxing that to a certain extent. I can't speak insofar as what type of surgeries will be included in that and whether or not the individual that you're speaking about fits into that criteria. But they are looking to look at two things. One is as it relates to the visitation, because you would note that they had some very strict guidelines surrounding visitation for obvious reasons to restrict visitors so that we would not see a increase or a transmission of COVID in the hospital. But also in addition to that, Trevor, they are looking to offer more types of surgeries. And again, that was announced recently and that's being looked at as we speak. So they will be offering more surgeries and procedures that both from an outpatient as well as inpatient procedures. So you should be hearing more about that from the hospital directly.
Thank you. My last question for you, madam. 11 days, you stated no new cases. You're testing 65, 100 and something on a daily basis. Who are the individuals that you're testing? My question is, who are these repeat individuals that are being tested to get these to these numbers?
We wouldn't have that information, but what we can say is those individuals are important individuals and they recognize the need for their own quote unquote civic duty to get tested and know their COVID-19 status. So, what I can say is that we are allowing for more pop up facilities starting with tomorrow, and we're encouraging everyone to know their COVID-19 status by getting a test.
Good evening, Don Burgess, Bermuda Broadcasting. Minister De Silva, you said that visitors to Bermuda will need to be tested every 3 days once they're on the island. Just a little more information on that. Will this testing take place at the hotel? How will it be done? What happens if a visitor tests positive? And with the hotel workers, will they have to be tested more regularly as well?
Gee, that's a lot of questions all in one, Don. But that it depends on where we are and what particular time. Like you may be talking about the billfish guys, say for example. Most of them will be staying at Hamilton Princess. Hamilton Princess will have medical staff on board and be ready to assist with whatever the needs may be. The second question you asked was if someone tests positive.
Right.
If they do test positive, they will be quarantined. They will have to go through a regular quarantine just like anyone else.
Okay. The third part of that was with the hotel workers, will they have to be tested more regularly once we start allowing visitors in?
Well, what we will do is we are certainly having, as you can imagine, we've had many meetings with all the stakeholders in the country, including the hotels. They are looking at when and how they can test most of their frontline employees. So that is the work that's been in process over the last several weeks. So that's why it was important today to announce a date so that they can now start making preparations in that regard. Because if we announce today that we're going to open up the borders today, then it doesn't give anybody preparation time. So what we'll find now is that now the hotels and everyone else that are frontline workers can start making preparations in that regard.
Oh, and one final question with regard to that. When they go back for their next test, will they have to be quarantined until they get the test result back like they are when they initially come to the island?
Yes, they will. The good thing is that the testing results are coming back very quickly. As you know, last Friday, with the arrival flight from Canada, all results were received within 4 to 6 hours.
Thank you very much. Minister Wilson, Dr. Karika Weldon told Bermuda Broadcasting that she's very enthused about switching from nasal testing to saliva tests. And having been tested today, I can tell you that that would probably be a lot more enjoyable, as they are quicker and much less invasive. What are your thoughts about saliva tests? Are there any downsides? And can you speak to the accuracy or sensitivity compared to the standard PCR tests?
I think the best person to have asked concerning the accuracy and sensitivity would have been Dr. Weldon herself. So no doubt when we hear her interview this evening at 8 o'clock, those questions would have been asked and addressed. I think it's an exciting alternative. It's very innovative, and the Ministry of Health is glad to be partnering with our labs and our scientists here in Bermuda to ensure that we have all the other types of testing that are available that that members of the public can avail themselves to.
Thank you very much. Mr. Premier, we have 11 straight days with no more COVID-19 cases. This is a radical improvement, even on early modeling. You have repeatedly said that we're not out of the woods yet, but you must be pleased where things stand at the moment.
I can't really say that, Don. And I am not as optimistic as other persons are. I'm not optimistic because I don't actually believe that people in the country are taking this disease seriously as they should. And the fact is that we still do have a risk, and it doesn't take a lot for us to end up moving backwards. So my optimism is not actually shared. We have taken, and I will just lay it there, a calculated risk to open more quickly then the thing is, you wait 2 incubation periods. We've waited 1.5 incubation periods before moving into phase 3. We moved personal services up before, in other jurisdictions may have had those. So I think we're going to have to adopt a wait and see approach. I am not optimistic. I am remaining guarded. And I think that that needs to be the attitude of the entire country. We are, in some cases and instances, acting as though if because we have this low number of cases, that all is well. There's 2 things. Number one, our testing numbers are not as high as I would like them, and that's the reason why the minister is rolling out, testing throughout the country, so it can no longer be an excuse about, driving all the way to the south side. It'll be right there in front of you and readily available, and people can get that particular testing there. But I think that we need to remember that this virus is still here. This virus is still on our shores. This virus is still circulating inside of our community. Certainly, when we have an issue of asymptomatic transmission, it is there. And that is why it is important and necessary for people to continue to wear their masks, continue to do the things which are necessary to prevent the spread and onward transmission of this virus. So I'm not looking, at this as, oh, yes, we're successful. Oh, yes, we've defeated the coronavirus. The coronavirus is going to be with us for a very long time. And we're going to have to learn to live with this virus and make sure we continue to adjust to our new normal. But I want to urge all the persons watching, all the persons listening, and the persons who will be watching your newscast that will begin shortly, that we are not out of the woods. And it is not a time to say, oh, everything's fine, everything's done, oh, there's only 9 active cases, so there's only 1 person in the hospital, because that can change, and it can change like this. It only requires 1 person who was inconsiderate to go to a family barbecue, for these persons who don't want to do things, have a lot of things, start singing, start laughing, start dancing, all the rest, and then all of a sudden, the entire family's there, they don't know, and that thing spreads. It is that quick that it can happen. And we have to understand and recognize that. There were stories from Chicago. I remember that there was this one person who went to a few family events and managed infecting a significant portion of his family. We are not out of the woods. And so as we're able to open up more of the economy, people must understand we have to accept the responsibility on all of us to make sure that we continue. So I'm not optimistic, to be completely honest. I remain guarded. The Minister of Health remains guarded. All the ministers remain guarded, and the entire country should continue to remain guarded. The last thing we want to do is to tell our hotel workers that they're not going back to work because we're not going to be able to open up the airport because on National Heroes Day, we decided to let our guard down. No.
People have been asking why certain sports can't reopen, like, for example, like cricket, which has good social distancing, even though it's 22 people on the field, 2 over the limit, or teaching academies and scuba diving with regard to, with the hospital situation being much better.
Well, like I said to Media Mara, did I say Media Mara? The sports are not prohibited in phase 3, but what is prohibited is the number of persons that can participate and congregate. So 20 people is the gathering size, but sports in and of themselves are not prohibited in this phase that we've just entered into.
And I think that it's also important to note that between the Ministry of Sports, the minister responsible for sports, Minister Fogo, and the Ministry of Health, the Bermuda Cricket Board came to the government about 2 weeks ago for their plan for reopening, and the government gave them approval to go ahead and commence. So I believe that they're getting ready for the commencement of their cricket season. But there were issues about, they laid out their plan about how they're going to maintain their social distancing, how they're going to minimize the possibility and risk of transmission. That was 2 weeks ago, and cricket training had already commenced. So we are able to give permission. So it is not accurate to say that we are preventing sports like cricket and other sports to happen. Those sports were actually given permission by the government in conjunction with the Ministry of Health and the Bermuda Cricket Board.
Okay. The last part of that with scuba diving, because the hospital situation is much better.
The hospital situation, that situation still remains an active situation. Scuba diving is permitted during this phase for commercial diving. So if somebody's for a business. However, recreational scuba diving at this point is not permitted, no. And it's for the reasons, as you rightly said, with respect to the requirement to ensure that we have proper oxygen supply for in the event that persons require it because of COVID and so forth. So at this point, recreational scuba diving is not permitted.
Okay, thank you very much. Phase 3 ushers in many more freedoms for people and businesses, such as indoor dining and the opening of churches and gyms. Many people will be physically going back to work next week and will want to buy their lunches from the grocery stores at this time. But we are continuing to hear complaints and disquiet from the public about the restrictions with the Alphabet Shopping Day system. We are aware that some stores are turning away many customers, some of whom are confused and say they think grocery stores are being targeted as no other retailers still have these restrictions imposed. Will phase 3 now upon us? Will the Alphabet Shopping system end? Especially like for lunchtime that restaurant or grocery stores
The only
offer.
place where Alphabet shopping still applies is for grocery stores, and the Cabinet Committee will reconsider that as we go forward. But still, right now, Alphabet shopping remains in place for the only place that it exists is for grocery stores. The reasoning and understanding for this is based on a number of factors. That is one of the essential services. We want to make sure we minimize the amounts of persons in the grocery store at any particular point in time, minimize the lines of which exists, and also as discounts are extended for the grocery stores on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. If we move back to where we were before, possibly having horses on Wednesday, a big accumulation, and that's not what we want. So we're going to continue to work through this. There have been comments that have come to us as to whether or not this will be changed. There were ministers who were discussing this earlier today. I think Minister Walter Oban, various grocers to get certain feedback, and then we will make any announcements. But the only place where Alphabet shopping does remain and Alphabet restrictions does remain is in grocery stores. It is important to note that as we change the law to allow for those persons who may miss their shopping day on Monday for Bermuda Day, we also did make sure we changed the law for this, and that law was actually changed when we went into, I think it was almost phase 2, that we made the allowance for not only the Bermuda Day holiday, but also this holiday. So the regulations were amended previously to cover the Bermuda Day holiday and the upcoming Heroes Day holiday. And I can confirm that on Sunday, the 14th of June, after 1 p.m., persons whose surnames begin with letters A through F may visit grocery stores. That is this Sunday, in lieu of persons who may have gone to the store on Monday. And I think that's your 6.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. What I will say to all of Bermuda is please heed the words of which I just shared. We are in phase 3, but there is still a global pandemic. The World Health Organization said that the pandemic is still with us. In many countries, it is still accelerating. We have been fortunate to not have an acceleration due to the work and vigilance of all of us. I sound like a broken record, but it is important. Wear your mask, wash your hands, keep your distance, and limit your interactions. There is a pandemic in our country and around the world still, and we must remain vigilant to ensure that we can continue the progress of which we made thus far. I wish everyone a very happy Bermuda Heroes Day weekend. Enjoy, stay safe, and remember the reason why we celebrate. It is for our 8 national heroes who fought and toiled to make Bermuda a better place. And let us make sure we remember them and all of our heroes who are working every day to make sure that this country remains safe during this pandemic. So with that, I say thank you all and good night.
Wash your